Imagine waking up to the sound of strangers laughing on your private dock. Now imagine those strangers being friends of the HOA's most infamous troublemaker, Karen. That's exactly how my peaceful Saturday morning turned into a full-blown police incident that the entire neighborhood still talks about. And trust me, it escalated faster than anything I've ever seen. It started with a single shout. "Hey! You can't be here!" That was my voice, echoing across the water as I stormed out of my house. A group of 6 adults, none of whom I recognized, were sitting on coolers, dipping their feet in the lake, acting like they owned the place. My dock, my property, my no trespassing signs clearly posted. And yet, here they were, sipping drinks like it was their personal resort. One woman turned around with an attitude heavy enough to sink a boat. "Relax," she said. "Karen told us everyone on the lake shares this dock, community property." Community property? On my land? That's when it clicked. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, the woman who believed every neighbor existed purely to obey her, had finally crossed a line she couldn't wiggle out of. For months, she had been trying to force me to join the HOA, even though my house wasn't part of their jurisdiction. She hated that I ignored her friendly reminders and mandatory suggestions. But trespassing? This was new. I told her guests to leave. They laughed, so I called the police. Minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up, lights flashing across the lake. The trespassers went pale, suddenly realizing this wasn't just a neighborly disagreement. But before the officers could even step onto the dock, I heard the unmistakable stomp of rage approaching. Karen, she came barreling down the hill, hair frizzed, sunglasses crooked, yelling at the officers before they even finished introducing themselves. "These are my guests! You can't handcuff anyone without speaking to the HOA!" The officers exchanged a look, the kind you give when you instantly know this is going to be a long call. Her guests tried to backpedal, insisting they didn't know the dock was private. But the officers pointed out the giant red private property, no trespassing sign bolted right behind them. And when one of Karen's friends mouthed off to the police, things escalated instantly. Cuffs came out. Karen absolutely lost it. And that moment, that was when everything blew up. As the officers secured the first pair of cuffs, the dock seemed to vibrate with tension. Neighbors began peeking from their windows, phones in hand, recording every second. Karen's face twisted with disbelief, fury, and something else. Fear that her perfect HOA image was collapsing. Everyone sensed incoming chaos. The moment the officers placed handcuffs on the first trespasser, Karen stormed forward like she was auditioning for a dramatic courtroom show. Her voice cracked through the air. "You can't arrest them! I'm the HOA president!" She said it like she expected the lake to freeze, the birds to stop flying, and the police to immediately apologize for daring to exist without her permission. But the officers didn't flinch. "Ma'am, step back," Officer Daniels warned, holding up a calm but firm hand. "This is private property." These individuals were asked to leave and refused. Karen jabbed her finger inches from his face. "This dock falls under HOA recreational access, and as the elected president, you're not elected to anything on this property," I cut in. "My land isn't part of your HOA." Her head snapped toward me like a malfunctioning animatronic. "Everything around this lake is shared," she hissed. "Your dock, your shoreline. This entire place is a community asset." Officer Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, unless you can show legal documentation, you need to step aside." "Documentation!" she shrieked. "I am the documentation!" Meanwhile, the officers continued securing the other trespassers. One man tried to twist away, muttering that this was ridiculous, while another kept repeating, "Karen said it was fine. Karen said it was fine." Their faces were beet red, part embarrassment, part fear. Karen shoved herself between the officers and her guests. "You'll release them now, or I swear I will have your badges. I run this neighborhood." The second officer, Williams, calmly replied, "Ma'am, interfering with an arrest is a crime. Don't make this worse." But worse was Karen's default setting. She tried to pull one guest away from the officer, literally grabbing his arm. Officer Williams immediately stepped forward, placing himself between them. "Ma'am, that's enough." For a second, Karen froze. Not because she realized she was in the wrong. No, that would require self-awareness. But because she felt the eyes of the neighborhood on her. People had come out onto their decks. Phones were pointed. This wasn't the moment of glory she imagined. It was a public meltdown with witnesses. Then came the final blow. Officer Daniels radioed dispatch, requesting additional units. Possible interference by HOA member. Karen's jaw dropped. Interference? I'm trying to help you! You're obstructing, Daniels said bluntly. The shock on her face didn't last long. It morphed into pure fury. She glared at me like I was the villain of a movie she wrote in her head. You did this, she growled. You're going to regret it. But in that moment, the only person sinking was her. Just when I thought the situation couldn't possibly spiral further, the universe decided to prove me wrong. As Karen continued pacing the dock like a general whose army had betrayed her, 3 more people appeared at the top of the hill, clipboard in hand, polo shirts tucked in, matching smug expressions. The HOA board. Of course, Karen must have alerted them the moment she realized things weren't going her way, because they marched down the hill as if they owned the entire shoreline. The tallest one, a man named Richard, Karen's right-hand rule enforcer, shouted before he even reached us. Officers! There must be some misunderstanding. This dock is part of the community's shared waterfront. Officer Daniels didn't skip a beat. Sir, this property is privately owned. The individuals on this dock were informed and refused to leave. Richard puffed out his chest. That may be his claim, but according to HOA bylaws, I cut him off. Your bylaws don't apply to land you don't own. My plot was never included. Check your own maps. Karen rushed to stand beside him, desperate for backup. See? This is why I called them. He's trying to steal access from the community. One of the handcuffed guests shot her a look. Karen, you said this was your friend's dock. She waved dismissively. Details. Officer Williams sighed, a long, tired sigh that suggested he suddenly regretted his entire career path. Look, he said to the board members, unless you have legal documentation showing ownership, this is a trespassing case. Richard flipped through his clipboard dramatically, as if papers would magically appear proving their authority. They didn't. He looked up, reddening. This is ridiculous. Everyone around the lake follows the HOA rules. I don't, I said plainly. Karen gasped, like I'd confessed to a felony. You can't refuse. This neighborhood needs structure. What this neighborhood needs, Officer Daniels said firmly, is for everyone to stop escalating the situation. At that moment, another patrol car pulled up, a 3rd unit responding to the interference call. Karen's face drained of color. The HOA board looked uneasy, their confidence shrinking now that real consequences were piling up. Richard stepped forward again, voice cracking. Officers, surely we can settle this without arrests. Officer Williams gestured to the handcuffed guests. These individuals are already being detained for trespassing and refusing orders. Interference or obstruction from anyone else will add charges. The board members exchanged nervous looks. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down. No, you can't do this. HOA rules matter. Ask anyone. A neighbor from across the lake yelled back, Not to him they don't! Leave the guy alone! Karen spun around, betrayed. The neighborhood wasn't rallying behind her. They were turning on her, and she knew it. By now, Karen's composure had completely disintegrated. Her hair was frizzed like a lightning rod. Her sunglasses were crooked, and her voice had risen to a pitch that could shatter glass. She flailed her arms as if trying to physically push reality into agreeing with her version of events. You can't do this. I run this lake. I decide who goes on this dock. I stepped back, letting her theatrics unfold. Neighbors were leaning over fences, phones aimed, some whispering, others laughing quietly. The police officers, trained to handle every conceivable meltdown, exchanged looks that screamed, Here we go again. Karen's guests, meanwhile, were squirming in handcuffs, mortified by the scene their host had created. One of them muttered, She didn't mention any of this. Another stammered, I thought this was a community thing. The officers didn't comment. They simply continued the procedure, keeping calm as Karen became a whirlwind of chaos. Then she escalated. She grabbed Richard, the tallest board member, by the collar of his shirt. You're supposed to support me, she yelled, shaking him as if he could magically conjure legal proof. Richard's face went pale, realizing he had not signed up for physical assault in addition to public humiliation. Officer Daniels immediately stepped between them. Ma'am, step back. Karen didn't listen. Instead, she pointed at me like I had personally orchestrated the apocalypse. This is all your fault. I will make sure you regret every single second of this. A crowd had gathered by now. Some neighbors shouted their support, backing the officer's actions. Others looked like they were about to call for additional backup. Karen, meanwhile, was yelling over everyone, completely oblivious to the reality that she was now the spectacle, not her guests. One neighbor yelled from across the street, "Karen, sit down!" Her response? A scream so loud that it made the birds scatter. "I am the law! I am the HOA!" And then it happened. One of her guests, frustrated and embarrassed, shouted, "Maybe you're not the law." Karen spun toward them, eyes wild, and shouted back, "I am the law! I am the law!" It was the perfect storm. Handcuffed guests, enraged HOA board members, an audience of neighbors, flashing police lights, and Karen at the center, a tornado of entitlement and fury. She had built this moment in her mind for months, a display of her authority, but in reality she had no control, none at all. The officers continued their calm, methodical approach, separating her from the dock, keeping the situation under control. Karen tried to resist, yelling, flailing, and even attempting to grab the handcuffs. But the law had no patience for tantrums. By the end of it, Karen was shouting threats. The HOA board was stunned, her guests were in custody, and I was left standing on my private dock, shaking my head in disbelief. The chaos finally began to settle, though the tension still hung thick in the air. Karen, now separated from her guests and slightly subdued, but far from defeated, stood on the grass at the edge of my property. Her hair was a mess, her sunglasses perched crookedly, and her HOA badge, if she'd actually needed one, seemed to have lost all authority in the real world. The officers guided the last of her guests into the patrol car, securing them safely, while I stood on my dock, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. My peaceful Saturday had turned into a neighborhood spectacle, broadcast live through smartphones perched on every fence, porch, and balcony. The lake, which usually echoed with calm water sounds and laughter, now reverberated with the remnants of Karen's fury. Karen tried to argue one last time, voice cracking. "You don't understand. I was only trying to protect the community. These people are my guests." Officer Daniels shook his head, speaking slowly so even she could follow. "Ma'am, protecting a community does not mean trespassing on private property. Your guests were warned, and you interfered. That's obstruction." The words seemed to bounce off her like water off a duck's back. She stomped her foot, spun around, and muttered something about lawsuits, legal action, and HOA meetings. But everyone around had stopped listening. Her credibility had evaporated. Even her board members avoided eye contact, realizing that she had led them into an embarrassing, completely unnecessary confrontation. Neighbors began approaching, some to thank me for handling the situation calmly, others simply to shake their heads in disbelief. One elderly woman said quietly, "I've never seen anyone act like that before, not even in movies." I could only nod. Karen's meltdown had become the weekend entertainment for the entire neighborhood. As the patrol cars drove away, Karen finally slumped against a tree, exhausted from her own theatrics. I walked along the dock, inspecting the area for any damage. None. Everything was intact, my property untouched by her antics. The realization hit me. She had tried to assert dominance, make a spectacle, and control my property. But in the end, the law and common sense had won. In the following days, the neighborhood buzzed with the story. Videos circulated online, showcasing Karen's rage, the police intervention, and her total loss of composure. HOA members quietly distanced themselves, realizing she had dragged everyone into embarrassment. My guests, now released, had learned an unforgettable lesson about Karen's brand of hospitality. And me? I returned to my dock, finally able to enjoy a peaceful evening. The water shimmered, reflecting the sunset, and the air was calm again. Karen's storm had passed, but the tale of that infamous Saturday would linger, retold with shock, disbelief, and a little bit of laughter for months to come. One thing was certain: never underestimate the chaos a single HOA Karen can unleash, or the calm resolve of someone who knows their own property.